what's more impressive, right? Is it impressive for the guy to be a world champion and win by one advantage every match, or the guy to get to the finals and he submitted everyone along the way? He worked like crazy to try to submit the other guy. He was super close, but he lost. To me, I'm going to look at he didn't get the gold medal, but to me, that's the martial artist is the guy who took second place in that regard. And this isn't a justification, for anything other than your approach. And that's what separates the Roger Gracies from just another world champion. Like Roger didn't just win. He submitted you, and you knew exactly what he was going to do, and there wasn't a damn thing you could do to stop him. Like, that to me is something special. That's where you're like, oh, you're not good. You are great. And perhaps the greatest, so what are we chasing, and again, different strokes for different folks. But I think if we're trying to do something special, we're trying to do something different, then we're going to have to take a different approach and a special approach.
Yeah, that's kind of to your point. It's like Lachlan Giles. I mean, I was at the last ADCC live, and just the performances that he had, win or lose, regardless. Did he win the bracket? Nobody cared. It was just the sheer intent, and just did it against in the open weight, and it was just amazing. That's to your point.
Absolutely, he was the hero. He was the hero of ADCC for me in a lot of ways. He didn't win the gold in his division or in the absolute, but to me, I think he was maybe top 3 most impressive athletes at the tournament, and that says a lot with all the talent that was there. So, Lachlan is a great example of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a really unique position too, because you see a lot of these events, you commentate at a lot of these events, and the events that have different rule sets. I mean, so what's your take now on the specific rule sets? Now that we're talking about that, we're seeing a lot of events where everybody's trained to hold position, get points, win, and they're not really in their mind trying to really hit that submission, which is that's the goal in jiu-jitsu. You just had a podcast with John Donaher, and he was saying there was 3 big things he wanted to change in jiu-jitsu: the leg locks, jiu-jitsu guys doing, be able to do takedowns in a great way, and the ability to hold somebody down that wants to stand up. You don't really see that a lot in jiu-jitsu. So these are things that we can attack, and via the rule sets. I mean, I just seem to think that if we're going to focus on, we understand why positionally you were awarded points, and they were created like 3 points to pass, 4 for mount. But over time now, we're seeing people that just are really good at that. And yeah, of course, the goal is submission, but now there's strategy in there. We got to be pushing for the submission more. There's a lot of questions in that, but what do you think?
Yeah. Greg, I think it's a really tough question. I think that there's a couple things, right? I think that humans are very adaptable and very creative and very crafty, and they will inevitably adapt their game for a rule set. Like, they'll always find a loophole, right? It's like any law that's made, someone will always find a way to be like, yeah, but I'm going to be over here on the edge of it and like expose that law or that loophole. So I think that a couple things, right? It's like the instructors have to instill that certain mindset and allow people to really understand how to go about the game. So I think there's that factor. I also think the referees honestly need to do more and not be afraid to penalize people for stalling or not moving. And so much of it, it's like, think about the mindset of like, I don't know, if we were to referee a match between Joe Blow and Henry, right? And then think about the difference between us, reffing a match between, I don't know, Marcelo Garcia and Gordon Ryan. You're like, think about your mentality, how that just shifted, how it changed. Like, Gordon, can you please not that they would ever stall, but like, you're like, people are going to be intimidated or afraid to make certain calls based on who's coaching, based on who's competing. I trained with this guy one time, or, Fabio Gurgel is yelling at me from the corner. I feel afraid to or I'm going to make a call because, so-and-so Gracie's yelling at me. These are all factors that are very real. Okay. Whether we want to, ignore it or not, like that's real. And referees, I feel like, need to do their part to push the action a little bit more. So it's a tough situation. And so I think it comes down to the approach of the competitor, and I think the referee of just not being afraid to really push the action. I think one simple thing would be no steps backwards. Just like folk style wrestling, freestyle wrestling, you're not allowed to take a step backwards. Like unless they have a good connection. Like I don't really think you're not. If you are not touching your opponent, you should not be able to take a step backwards. I think just that alone would help. That's like one little simple thing to help push along the matches, because like how many times, like the Kasai mat, you know, when I talked to Rich about this, it was like the Kasai mat is freaking huge. Okay. How many times did guys end up almost off the mat or off the mat? Because the one dude's like backing up and he gets all the way to the edge of the corner. He's like, okay, if you try to take me down, I'm just going to go out of bounds and you're not going to get your point. So again, that's like how as humans we adapt to certain things. So it's like, if he wasn't allowed to take a step backwards, that wouldn't happen. Now the big mat serves a purpose, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, you just hit on something that I've been thinking and for a while is not only the stepping back, but if you're seeing like somebody's standing and then somebody's playing bottom, especially with somebody who's a leg attack guy, if they get caught up in an ashi or something and they just turn and rip their leg out and escape. Now, is that, to me, that's not pushing forward. Yeah, you were trying to get out of an ashi or something, but to me, that counts as stepping back. Like you're not trying to break through and pass the guard at that point. Yo, somebody leg entangles you and you're just ripping out and you're stepping back and resetting. Like we saw that happen so many times. I think that should be, a stalling type of a thing.
Greg, that's a great point. Actually, that could actually be, hey, if you rip out of a submission, like then, and you break away, shouldn't that be maybe a -1 for you or a +1 for them, or at least, right? Like that's a great point. I mean, just little things like that to get people to understand, like, all right, that was attack. You ran away from the situation. The same way if like you come at me with a knife, it's like you have the advantage. I'm getting the hell out of there. Like so that's a good point.
Yeah, I've seen so many matches where the whole match was just that. You try to pass, the guy leg entangles you. You don't want to be involved in leg locks. You turn around and rip your leg, and then it keeps going on like that. Like I think is a huge thing.
Right, and it's like, if you score that a draw, like I don't think that's right. If the guy on bottom is attacking and had your leg in a compromised situation, and you had to rip out of it and run away, that guy should have won the match. The guy on bottom should have won the match for getting that attack, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on a couple of podcasts, and I'm kind of getting to the point of it's making more sense. If you look at wrestling and if you look at judo, that has a lot more time in as far as adjusting to rule sets. What's the goal in judo? The goal in judo is the ippon. What's the goal in wrestling? The goal in wrestling is the pin. The only points that surround those rule sets is only around the goal. So in judo, you're only getting like a wazari or half point because you almost got the ippon. In wrestling, you'll get back points because you almost got the pin. They're not giving you positional points. So I think in jiu-jitsu, if we take a little, lesson from wrestling and judo, we should only be awarding things based on the submission. Our goal in jiu-jitsu is submission. And granted, positions are great, but even to this point, like if I pass your guard and hold you down, but you replace that guard back, I don't think I should be awarded the guard pass points. And there's something to be said about like, positionally in a street fight, I get it. If you hold somebody in the mount or you pass their guard, I could have sat up and hit you. But to that point, if I sat up and hit you when I passed you in side control, you can replace. I just made room.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. I also think like, I know that if you mount me, right, you're in a big advantage, right? But if I reverse you and get on top, what's the difference between me being in a guard and getting on top and me being in mount and getting on top? Like, I don't know. I think in a lot of ways that also, maybe doesn't reward the guy on bottom like he should. I don't know. I'm trying to think of it differently, but I think that things like that are situations where we should be evaluating it and saying, what are we trying to do as a martial art here? Because we are, whether we admit it or not, there's a lot of sport jiu-jitsu at different academies that we might be shifting towards the Taekwondo model. And, I think what made Brazilian jiu-jitsu so awesome was the fact that it was effective. with resistance. It was effective against people who were trying to beat us up. Are we, if I get in a fight with a group of people, do I want the dude who's like a scholar in jiu-jitsu, who's like a really like world-class scholar? If we get in a fight and like your life is on the line, is that the guy you choose to be on your team?